Welcome to the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bello, and today I've got a micro commitment strategist. I love that title, Vladimir Adonis, on the show. Welcome, Vladimir.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to sharing with your guests.
Awesome. And do you usually go by Vlad or Vladimir? Either one cool?
Either one is perfect. I can go by either one.
Okay, just wanted to make sure, but it's like people calling me Christopher, and I'm like, only my mom says that when she's mad about something. It's like, could you just call me Chris? It's a little easier. So thanks for joining me on the show today. And I'm really excited because today we're going to be talking about getting prospects to say yes with the 4-step micro commitment strategy. A lot of people, whether we like it or not, we're all in sales to some extent. We've got to sell ourselves, to get on other podcasts, to have speaking engagements. And so I'd love to dive into these 4 steps, and feel free to, any direction you want to go, you can name them off. And like we talked about before we hit record, I'll ask a couple of questions in between that the audience would likely also have, so we can really unpack everything.
Yeah, certainly. So if it's okay with you, I'll just start off by walking you through why I embrace that concept and why I embrace that methodology. Because
For sure.
There's a lot of different methods and or things that we can embrace. And I want to share with you why I embrace that methodology, and thereby share with you my first step. So back in 2015, I launched a dating/a dancing type of a website. I was employed at that time, and my goal was to use a new vehicle, and a new vehicle was going to be entrepreneurship as a way to go into business. So I launched this dating site, and I paid a programmer close to $30,000 to build me this dating site. And when I first started my marketing process at the time, I was trying to use organic marketing process to promote and or market a dating site. That was not going too well. So one of the first platforms I turned to for the sole purpose of trying to reach a larger audience was Facebook. And at the time, when I tried to market and promote on Facebook via paid ads, Facebook told me no. And the reason why they told me no is because at the time,
the category, right?
I'm sorry?
Is it because of the category, like no dating type stuff?
No dating, exactly. It was because of the category. So they told me no dating. So I was like, okay, that's not so good, because at the time I started to study and I started to learn more about Facebook ads, but they wouldn't allow me to promote and or market. So what I did is I just went to other affiliates and other platforms for the sole purpose of promoting and marketing my dating site. But at the time, from a cash flow standpoint, I didn't have a lot of cash flow, and it was costing me about $20 to acquire and or to get a new lead. And from a cost standpoint, that wasn't really feasible for me. So I continued down my path and down my journey of consuming content, buying courses, and I started to notice something about my very own behavior. I noticed that it was very easy for me to say yes for free resources, to free information, and to free guides. Not only was it easy for me to say yes, I found that after I said yes to some of those free resources and or some of those free guides, I found that it was okay for me to go ahead and take the next step with some of those individuals and some of those brands. So I bought courses, and sometimes, in some cases, joined coaching programs, etc. And at some point, one of the individuals that I had purchased the course from told me, why don't I follow that same exact methodology for my dating site? So I went back to my dating site at the time. I created 2 free resources. The first free resource I created was a free resource for if an individual wants to connect with a male on the dance floor, here's a free resource to connect with a male on the dance floor. If an individual wants to connect with a female on the dance floor, here's a free resource to connect with a female on the dance floor. I went back to Facebook and I told Facebook, hey, I have these free resources and these free guides, and I simply want to go ahead and share these free resources and free guides, and I want to market them. And guess what happened this time around? Facebook told me yes, because I was no longer promoting and marketing my dating site. I was just promoting and marketing a free guide.
Cool.
Not only did they tell me yes, the cost for me to acquire a lead went from $20 via the other platform to now I was paying $2 to acquire a new lead. So hence why the first step in my micro commitment strategy is to lead with free resources and or free guide. And that is why I embrace the concept.
Okay, awesome. So a lot to unpack there. I remember reading vaguely Facebook ads has some kind of blueprint or guideline for people who want to learn what to run. And they have a few topics like the dating area. And then I think even real estate has some rules around housing. Like I can't target specific audience. It has to be just like a radius thing. And so I kind of, my ears perked up at that. And I figured that was the problem that you ran into, but you were able to get around it from offering a free guide, because now you're not promoting your dating site. You're not driving traffic there. you're teaching somebody how to, you know, find a male or female dance partner on the dance floor. And then from there, when you have that little like bridge step in a way, your audience is more likely. And then the second thing that I wanted to highlight there is that you said, I wrote that down, your cost per lead was $20 a lead previously. And now because of this free resource, you're right, our own activities and actions, we're way more willing to subscribe for that free guide and put our name on an email list. And as we start to get familiar, we're like, okay, I feel like this resonates. It's some good stuff here in this free guide. I learned a lot. You know, I got that dance partner, and you're willing to make that an investment in the next step more easily instead of just trying to advertise that final step or, you know, the final program to people on that platform directly. So the first step, you'd say offer some kind of free resource or guide?
Yes, that is certainly the first step. And that first step was a game changer for me back when I started using it for my dating site, and I still use it today for multiple businesses as well.
Yeah. And anytime we listen to a new podcast, or even you hear at the end, the call to action is usually like, hey, get my free ebook, or I actually wrote 5 steps on how to increase your income by this percent. Go to this website. And it's basically the opt-in page where you get that free digital resource. In most cases, I see that it's digital, but of course, some people do the free book plus shipping. You know, like a physical book might have a little more value in someone's eyes maybe. But I really, really, really love that because it's a lot. It's like dating. You got to get to know someone before you, ask them to marry you, for example. And so if you're trying to just pitch that $500 coaching package or, you know, work with me as a real estate agent, you don't know who I am, that's going to be a lot more difficult than if you teach them something and give them something for free, show your value, and then you can take them through to the next step. So what's step number 2?
Certainly. So step number 2 is at every step of the process, we want to make sure that we are solving a problem. Before I became an entrepreneur, I worked as an executive for a small university, and I did that for about 12 years. When I worked for that small university was not the only university in town. We had a private university, which is the university in which I worked at. We had a state college, and we also had a community college. When I first started working there, I noticed that the university in some cases was charging between 10 to 15 times more money for the private university compared to the community college. And at first, when I first started working there, I couldn't understand why a student would decide to come to that university compared to other universities that were at a much cheaper price. But the more I worked there, the more I started to study their marketing process, and they did a very good job of communicating the problem that the prospective student was having. So for instance, if a student desired to go into the nursing program back in 2016, they had 2 choices. They can go to the state and or the community college, and the waiting period at that time was about 3 years. So they would wait about 3 years to get into the nursing program. Or they can attend the private university, and they would have a waiting period of less than 6 months. Not only would they have a waiting period of less than 6 months, the completion rate and the time for them to complete the program would be half the time. So what the university did at the time was to say, hey, are you a prospective nursing student that wants to get into the nursing program in the next 6 months? Not only do you want to get in there in the next 6 months, you also want to complete it in this time frame, get out into the workforce, start making money much quicker. And because they communicated the problem, people made commitments with them. Not only did people make commitments with them, people also paid a lot more money. So for businesses out there, let's just say if you are a search engine optimization company, that's awesome. You offer search engine optimization services, but what is in it for the end user, right? So someone who can use and or benefit from search engine optimization services, people are looking for what it is that they provide. On Google, people are going to Google all of the time looking for services, but your services can't be found, and I can help you to be found by the people who are looking for you. So we want to make sure, even if we're giving away something for free, and when we're communicating stuff in our marketing process, we talk about the problem that we're solving and what is in it for the end user. So that's step number 2 in my 4-step methodology.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So basically, you're just talking about the problem, but also sharing the solution or the benefits. I always hear that is like, you're not selling the features, you're selling the benefits, the outcome, right? So in that example, you're telling people, hey, you want to finish this program. You also want to get in the next 6 months instead of wait for 3 years. And you want to finish it in this certain time frame. So you're kind of uncovering that pain point because they have that thing that they want, but you're making sure to let them know that you have what it is that they want and you can help them get there. right?
Most certainly. So when I run an ad on Facebook these days, I'm saying, hey, are you a coach or a consultant that's looking to use video marketing? You probably heard that video marketing could be something that's very powerful, but you just don't know what to say via video marketing. I'm going to just provide you with a free resource and a free guide, and it's going to show you the 3 things you need to do to get started with video marketing, right away. So I'm telling them, hey, here's what video marketing can do for you, and here's how this free resource or this free guide is going to help you to solve a very specific problem.
Awesome. I love how these all stack. So you tell them that you're able to help them solve the problem, and then you offer a free resource or guide to start to get them along the path. And then also one more thing that I recently heard a friend say is a lot of people have this like elevator pitch, like I help blank do blank. I help men lose X amount of weight in whatever timeline. You have to have like that problem solution statement in a way. So that's exactly what you're doing here. When you're doing advertising, you're like, are you a blank looking for blank? And whoever that person is, whatever it is that they're looking for, they kind of stop what they're doing. They're like, yeah, I do need help with video marketing, or I've heard that's important. I'm not doing it. Okay, you've got a free resource. Let me check that out. And it kind of guides you down to the next step. So that's step number 2. Is there anything else that you wanted to include on that step, or you want to move on to step 3?
Yeah, we can certainly move on to step number 3.
Cool. What's step number 3?
The thing that I've come to fall in love with is what we call an inbound marketing process, as opposed to an outbound marketing process. When I worked for the university would generate leads. They worked with all types of different advertisers that would generate leads. And what was required from the advisors, the admissions advisors, that they were required to reach out to prospective students and to get on the phone with these students for the sole purpose of trying to educate and or help those students to become a new student. Now, that model did indeed work. I watched it work, and it worked over and over again for about 12 years. And when I made that transition into entrepreneurship, my dating site didn't work, and I made the pivot to learning how to do lead generation and marketing. I was trying to adapt a very similar model. So you've probably heard of many different marketplaces that exist, whereby an individual who's looking for services, they would go to a marketplace such as Fiverr, Upwork, and one of those marketplaces for the sole purpose of trying to find someone to help them with a certain type of service. So at some point during my journey, I went to one of those marketplaces. It wasn't Fiverr and it wasn't Upwork, but I went to one of these marketplaces, and I went to the marketplaces. I know I can buy leads from these marketplaces for people who are looking for social media marketing, and I can reach out to those individuals for the sole purpose of explaining to those people the value that I can bring to the table and how I can go ahead and help them. Now, this may have been me because I know I watched it work, and it worked via the university. But for whatever reason, after getting on about 15 of those outbound calls, I had a very hard time, I don't know if you want to use the word convincing and or educating and or advising to people that I'm the right fit for them. It just felt weird. They were asking me a lot of questions. They didn't necessarily, believe in or buy into what it is that I was saying to them. So for me, I didn't necessarily like their methodology. I wanted to go and say, okay, how can I create a process whereby when people are interested in using social media marketing, when people are interested in getting, more leads, how can I set up a process so that way the traffic comes to me and they go through an inbound process whereby they know they're scheduling the time with me, and they go through a frame to understand what it is that I do, because I believe that if they understand what it is that I do from a conversion standpoint, the conversion rate will be just that much higher. So I created an inbound marketing process whereby the right type of individual would go through a process, and one of those processes required them to consume some content to understand a little bit more about what it is that I do. And only after they understand a little bit more about what it is that I do, they are then granted the opportunity to schedule a time on my calendar. And then from that point, they can go ahead and have a conversation with me. Well, after implementing and creating such process and taking about 10 calls, I had a 20% conversion rate versus making 15 outbound calls and having a 0% conversion rate. So from that point on, I have embraced an inbound marketing process whereby I would much rather people understand, the people who are coming through my marketing process understand what it is that I do and understand that they're scheduling the time with me and my organization, as opposed to me explaining to people, this is who I am. This is your first time hearing of me, talking to me, and this is how I can help you. So I embrace the inbound process, and I help my clients, create an inbound marketing process as well. So I want my traffic to understand what it is that I do, as opposed to me explaining what it is that I do. So that's step 3 in my 4-step methodology.
I love that. And one thing that I've heard that referred to as is pull versus push marketing. Push is you're calling people, you're outbound, you're trying to call a bunch of people, you're getting a bunch of no's because maybe they're not that right fit for what you offer, or at least, maybe working with you directly, versus the pull or the inbound marketing. Also, but having that step where they can learn a little bit more, consume some content, and then book. Now you're just running traffic to that page in a certain percentage, 20% conversion rate. They're going to watch that. They're going to resonate. They're going to feel like, yeah, this guy has what I'm looking for. He can fill that need in my life right now. I'm going to book a call, which also makes you have that perceived expert status instead of you calling them when maybe they're at the grocery store or they're in the middle of something, or, you can hear kids screaming in the background. When they book with you, they're going to make sure, hey, honey, can you take care of the kids? I'm going to be sitting down waiting for this call. With my notebook, it's a totally different dynamic. Have you noticed that? Whenever you were making these calls, did you notice people were just like, who are you? I'm trying to get off the phone.
Yeah, most certainly. It wasn't well received, per se. And I'm saying to myself, wait a second, you just went online to this organization. You expressed to this organization, this is what it is
that you're interested.
And that you're interested. Why am I having such a hard time? And I didn't necessarily like the feel on the phone. I didn't like that whole thing. I was like, I have to create a different, different process. So for me, these days, I love the idea of pre-frame. So even if someone goes through and they are in my group, and they're in my group, and I give them the opportunity to send me a DM if they're interested in taking the next step with me. One of the first things I ask them is, have you consumed any of my content? And if they haven't consumed any of my content, even if it's just a 10-minute piece of video, I want them to consume some of my content and understand who I am, what it is that I do, and how it is that I help them. Because when I get on the phone with them, I don't want to be trying to do a lot of explaining. I don't mind doing a little bit of explaining, but I want them to have an understanding before they schedule a time on the phone with me.
That's awesome. So you're making sure that they do that. And I know this because I tried to interview one guy and he had the same strategy. He's like, hey, I'm not doing any podcast bookings right now. I really wanted to have him on my show, but he sent me the link and he's like, have you read any of my books yet? And I'm like, oops, no, I haven't. Maybe I should buy one of them and actually mention something, and that'll get his attention where he'll be on my show next time. But that way you're making sure that they consume, they educate themselves, and it probably answers most of the questions that they would probably take 10 minutes asking you on each phone call. So you're also eliminating the amount of questions you're having to answer. I know you said you're still open to answering a few questions if needed to guide them towards the close or the next step in the process. But I can definitely see how that education piece helps to eliminate the clutter. Because if they don't resonate, if they don't really like what you have to say, or they don't feel like that's really a problem they're having, they're not going to book a call. The people who watch it, and it hits those pain points and they seem, to trust you and they get to know you a little more. Those people who book the call, you're not going to be answering the same 15 questions every single time because they already got the gist of it from the video. So very, very good points. Thank you for elaborating on that. The pre-frame is like the main thing to let everyone know. You got to make sure to pre-frame them before you jump on that call. And are you doing mostly phone calls, or do you do Zoom calls, or either or? I'm just curious.
I do either or. I do a combination of both phone and or Zoom call. I do both.
Just based on the client, I'm sure some people prefer phone over Zoom. So having the option to do both kind of opens it up for a little more flexibility. So how about step number 4?
All right, step number 4 is not a sexy step. Step number 4, a lot of people probably have heard of already. Step number 4 is follow-up. And I'm going to tell you why I believe follow-up is key. While working at the university, when I first started working at the university, we were what we call a private for-profit university. And what that means is that from a state funding standpoint, we had limited amount of free state funding that we can pass on to our students. But at some point, the university became what we call private not-for-profit. And when they became not-for-profit, they were granted a lot more free funding from the state And this created what I call a win-win type of a situation. And the reason being is because we can then take this free funding, in this case, this was millions of dollars, and we can pass it on to our students, and our students can then thereby take out a lot less money in loans and create a win-win type of a situation. And I remember when the state granted us some of this money, one of the main stipulations was, we're going to grant you this funding and you have to use 100% of it in order to be eligible the following year. And I remember just being the head of the department at that time and just being excited and reaching out to the students who were eligible, and reaching out to them via email and saying, hey, student, I have great news. You're eligible for some additional free money, in some cases, thousands of dollars. All I need you to do is come down to the financial aid office, sign a piece of paper, and after you sign a piece of paper, you're going to receive this free money. And at the time, we didn't have 100% compliance. So we didn't have 100% response rate. Everyone didn't respond. So then we went to phase 2 of our campaign. And phase 2 was we simply got on the phone to reach out to these students and say, hey, student, come down to the financial aid office, free money. All you have to do is sign this piece of paper. Still not 100%. So then we went to phase 3. And phase 3 was for the students who were on campus, we had to tell the professor, hey, do not admit these students because they need to come down to the financial aid office in order to sign paper. The students who were online, we had to, in some cases, block them because, again, we had to be 100% compliant. So I say all of this to say that in some cases, we had to reach out to students 5, 6, or 7 different times just so they can say yes to us and just so they can take advantage of this free money. So that was true when I was running the campaign for the university to give out free money. And that's very true when I run marketing campaigns as well. So for instance, in every step of my marketing process, I always have contingencies and I always have what ifs. So I'm giving away something for free and I send someone to the landing page. Let's just say if I got 100 clicks to the landing page, in a perfect world, there's no way that 100% of those people will take the next step with me. So what am I going to do? I'm going to retarget the individuals who saw the landing page, but they didn't necessarily take action, right? So that's one follow-up methodology. The second follow-up methodology is now they've provided me with their email address, they're consuming the free content, and that free content is supposed to educate them and advise them to the next step of my marketing process, which is to schedule a time on the phone with me. Well, a large percentage of them won't do so. So then what am I going to do? I'm going to create a retargeting campaign that's going to communicate to the individuals who provided me with their email address, but they didn't schedule a time on the phone. So at every step of the marketing process that you create, you must have contingencies. You must have what ifs because human nature is not going to take action the very first time. And you must have top of mind and or follow up at every step of the process. And the reason why I embrace it is from the time that I worked at the university to the time that, I do things here from an entrepreneurship standpoint, I've noticed that follow-up is certainly key.
And I imagine that you retarget at each step of the process, right? So it's a customized message. You said if they get to the landing page and then that's all they do, they'll get retargeted like, hey, are you sure you didn't want this free guide or to opt in? And then after they opt in and you capture their email, now they're getting your weekly email newsletter. You're teaching them through your content. And the sole purpose, you said, of that is to get them to basically book a call with you if possible, or take the next step, whatever that is, right?
Yeah, whatever that next step is. My next step in my case, in most of the time, is to book a call. So yeah, I'm inviting them to take a call. And then I'm also having what we call a consumption sequence. So if I just gave someone the ability to consume some free content, I'm not going to assume the very first time that I invite them to go and consume that free content, even though they just told me 20 minutes ago they want it. I'm going to create a series of emails that's going to educate them on why they need to consume the free content. So then if they consume the free content is going to do the job of educating them, and the free content is going to do the job of selling them on the call. So even after I obtain the email address, I'm still creating a consumption sequence because they need to be able to consume the free thing.
That's very helpful. I wrote that down, consumption email sequence, because what I do and what a lot of people do, it's sometimes just, okay, here you go. Here's that free guide. Now you're on the email list. It's just one email. But the thing is, when people pay, they pay attention. So too many times it's so easy to just drop your email and get that free guide. I'm guilty of this. I get on so many email lists and I just save the free guide and I'm like, I'll read it later, you know? And if no one follows up with me, I forget. And it's just sitting there in my folder. It's like 15 or 20 pages of amazing stuff that I'm too busy. I'll get around to it later. And then you never do, versus having a consumption sequence. You can even break it down, 5 steps to do this or 4 steps to do that. And you could have 4 different days of emails like, hey, day 1, this is what we're going to do. Here's one small step you can take today to notice this change in your life. And then stick around for tomorrow. We're going to be talking about the second step. So you kind of have that little story in a way. Is that how you look at it? More like you're sharing parts of the story across a certain amount of time?
Yeah, certainly. They're just consuming in a different way. So, step number 1, I'm going to tell them. So step number 1, I discussed what step number 1 is via the free guide. I'm not going to assume that they consume the free guide. So I'm going to kind of just give them the information high level via email. This is why I embrace this concept. And this is why this concept is important. And these are the things that you would consider. And by the way, I share more about this via the free guide. Just go consume the free guide. But exactly what you just said, that's precisely what it is that I'm doing. We're just giving them the information via a different medium to encourage them to go and consume the rest of it.
Awesome. It's super simple. Like when we're talking about this, it almost seems like common sense, but at the same time, a lot of us don't do this. What we actually go in and we subscribe and we download the free guides and we do this all the time as consumers. But for those in the audience, the entrepreneurs and the solo business owners and those who want to go down that path, we have to start thinking about this of like creating the consumption email sequence, not just going through them ourselves as the customers, because we're all getting sold stuff. But at the same time, the goal and the purpose of this podcast is to help others to be in the driver's seat of producing the content, creating the products to sell or the services to offer. So these are really, really good steps. Is there anything that we missed or that you'd like to go on, touch on in any more detail, Vladimir?
Yeah, those are the main steps. And those are the things that, we do from a micro commitment standpoint at every step of the process.
Yeah. And it's just practice, repetitions as we do more of these campaigns and we tweak our guide and we get on more of those calls and we see what are people looking for. The questions that come up on those calls, I'm sure, help you tweak the messaging. Maybe your pre-frame needs to answer a couple more questions if the same questions keep coming up on those calls. And that way you're fixing parts of the process and you're just doing a little bit of tweaks here and there so that every time you get on there, it's like a system and a science. You know what to say, a question they're going to ask, how to pitch them and let them know of the solution, and your conversion rates will go up. So lots of great stuff here, Vladimir. And where can our audience go to connect with you, to learn more, to get a free guide or anything, get on your consumption email sequence list? Do you have a certain place I should send them to?
Yes, most certainly. So the guide essentially is an optimization guide from a marketing standpoint. So you know how sometimes you create a marketing process, but it's not fully optimized, or you don't have a marketing process in the first place. So I have an optimization framework that you can use to be able to optimize your marketing process. And you can take advantage of that free resource, that free guide, by going to vladadonis.com, VLADADONIS.com, to be able to gain access to that free guide.
Awesome. Well, Vlad, thank you so much for your time. Really good tips. And I love steps because they're like super simple to follow and do a checklist. Do I have this? Okay. What's step number 2? What's step number 3? So I'll make sure to drop that in the show notes, and everyone make sure to go get that free guide and check it out. I like to do this thing. People call it funnel hacking or email hacking, like get on people's lists and look at the sequences that they're sending out. So same thing with yours. I'd love to get on that email list. I'm definitely going to get that free guide because I'm just curious to see what's that first email I get? What do I get 2 days later? Do you hit me with a video saying, hey, I noticed you didn't do this? It can get very, very customized. And so thank you once again for your time and for sharing those amazing tips.
Thanks again, Chris, for having me on the show.
It's been fun. Thank you. We'll stay in touch. Okay.
Thanks.